Say hello to my cat, Darla. She's a nice lady. Yeah. She wants some of this. How's your morning going? Well, it's morning where I am. I don't know if it's morning where you are. I will say that all of this happened because there's a video going around with some woman claiming that you can tell if a person is actually in pain by looking in their eyes, and their eyes will do like a thing if they're in pain. And anyway, so that's what I did when I saw that claim, and I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll just check into what, what's going on. And I realized, yes, I actually do know enough about the wellness to supremacy pipeline to have informed opinions and share some actual history. Have I wasted enough of your time with my preamble? Yes. Okay, now I'm on the Book of Face. Hi, hello, internet. Okay, we're talking about what the supremacy pipeline. I'm not going to use that color, but we know what the color is that I'm referencing. And what got me started on this topic in the last day or so was some history I was sharing about the modern psychedelic movement and how it actually relates to the supremacy pipeline. And in that, I realized, oh, I know a ton. I actually know a lot of this history because I was in the pipeline. Yeah, I was deep in the pipeline. I am so very much not a supremacist that at every turn, I think, where I could have really gone, thankfully, my Indigenous teachers with lineage helped me pull out, but I digress. So let's talk about neurolinguistic programming. There's a video going around on, I saw it on TikTok. You might have seen it elsewhere with a white woman from Europe saying, I think she might be Australian, sharing about body language, that you can tell what a person is thinking and feeling and what's really going on with body language. And every time I hear what's really going on, my ears perk up, because that means that this person thinks that they can see the invisible and read what is unconscious and just know things by looking. I mean, I believe that too, but that's usually when I'm just lazy or, wanting to pretend like I have superpowers. Ready? Go get it. So the book that this person wrote is called The Face Whisperer. And then of course, it's not on any of her stuff. I had to like go find it. But here's what this person says about how they came to neurolinguistic program. Oh, actually, let's talk about the history of NLP. That is much more relevant. Neurolinguistic programming started in Santa Cruz in the 1970s, as did most of these modalities that are now new age spiritualism. Many of them happened in Santa Cruz in the 70s. There was a lot of LSD involved. Okay, human potential movement. So in Santa Cruz in the 70s, this kid, I always get the names wrong, was at, so I'm going to just look at it, he was at Santa Cruz and had been helping the founder of Gestalt theory, right, says John Grinder, Richard Bandler, Bandler, was at the University of Santa Cruz. University of Santa Cruz, by the way, fun fact, is right near where the llama I used to hang out with was. But anyway, I continue. So Richard Bandler gets connected to John Grinder or Grinder, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. And in 1975, they produce a book called The Structure of Magic, which should tell you how scientific this is. I am only getting on the science part of this because people claim science. When I hear science, I hear theories, I hear testing, I hear measure. Anyway, according to these two, Bandler and Grinder, NLP, neurolinguistic programming, can treat phobias, smoking, your eyesight. If you've ever been taught to sell from the stage, if you've ever gone to training, like Train the Trainer, this is how you sell a course from the stage. Much of those techniques are rooted in neurolinguistic programming. Remember, these guys were all kicking around the same time. So the NLP guys were kicking around the same time as Werner Erhard, who developed EST, which became the landmark forum, which is a crunchy cult. That does not make these people that way. I'm just saying this is how the pathway, this is one of the pathways of supremacy in the wellness space. There are so many massive claims made about NLP. The founder of NLP, he had a break with Erickson, who's the father of modern hypnosis. I am now going into oral history as it was shared with me by psychedelic elders in San Francisco. Bandler and Erickson, oh, they have a problem. There's an issue. Might have been Grinder, but one of them, the NLP people, had an issue with Erickson, and it was one of those, the student breaks off and develops their own thing, and that's how we have NLP. So it was also a response to perceived constraint. The professor who started it was a professor of linguistics. I do have a little bit of a background in linguistics, not so much, but it was part of my graduate studies. And it's a pretty interesting field, but the programming part, okay, what are people being programmed towards? So then I go back to this eye video. This person saying, making the claim that you can tell if a person is actually in pain by scanning their eyes. So Grinder wrote a book in the 1970s about the eyes. So I believe this person, I'm inferring, I believe this person is using 50-year-old technology, which is also problematic. What has happened in the last 50 years to advance the field? So the basic assumption is that I can tell all kinds of things about you by me observing you and me making determination. Do you see the problem? Okay. That is, and it's so weird to me because it's considered a holistic approach. How can it be a holistic approach? Where's the person that you're working with, NLP practitioner? If you just can look at somebody and know what's going on and know what they need and just do it. And in one session, a lot of this NLP stuff gets, I would use the word Borg, like from Star Trek, the way the Borg just kind of like they just assimilated. NLP was assimilated into management consulting mindset from the 70s and 80s through Werner Erhard. So Werner Erhard develops EST. Now I'm going to have to look this up because yes, I know a lot, but I don't have this much memory. Okay, Werner Erhard. I want to disclose, I've mentored with proteges of Erhard. I know this shit firsthand, okay? EST. I need a Kleenex for this. EST. The purpose of the EST training was to transform your ability to experience living so that you can change. But it was a flippin' pressure cooker. Erhard used to lock people in the room for like 3 days. He would just lock them in and say, okay, here we are. You're doing it. What's happening? And it would be all this pressure. The word that gets tossed around in certain training circles is perturbation. So there's assimilation of a chemistry term into people and training. We're just going to add pressure. We're going to perturbate and make some diamond out of that chaos. Sorry, that was me having a memory from about 25 years ago. Give me a moment. Okay, so EST Let me see. Oh, okay, here is a interview with Erhard. These are all white men. We have to recognize these are white guys. Erhard was a white man. John C. Lilly, Center of the Cyclone, isolation tanks, white man. Gestalt therapy, white man therapy. Holotropic breathwork, Stanislav Grof. What an amazing, incredible tool, white man. Here's what Erhard has to say about what he did in the 1970s. Every human being's deepest, most natural expression is the desire to make a difference in life, of wanting to matter. We can choose to make the success of all humanity our personal business. I'm reading from Werner Erhard. We can choose to be audacious enough to take responsibility for the entire human family, to make our love for each other and for the world what our lives are really about. And then he locked people in a room for days because it was boomer love. That's how you did it in the boomer time. So, so now I'm going back on oral history as was taught to me. So Erhard's primary thinking, and this is, you will see this as a thread into the modern wellness space, as is defined by people who look like me, mammary glands and not a lot of melanin. Shit happens. So Erhard might have broken with Est, or somebody broke with Est, and it becomes the landmark forum. Oh, no, it is. Okay. So Est becomes landmark, and landmark is like a full-on fucking fascinating thing. I have sadly experienced some of it. It is it's 100% rooted in neurolinguistic programming. It is 100%, like a lot of the tools and the techniques that are used in the training itself are the same and similar tools and techniques that are used by high control groups. I remember going to an Esalen derived training. And so, oh no, it was the forum. And this guy was like, people say we're a cult. We want you to go out. We want you to leave. We don't want you to stay. You know what they want you to do? They want you to leave and enroll people. You can only advance. This may not be true anymore, but at the time I was exposed to the Landmark Forum and all of this, you could only advance by enrolling people under you. And they say they're not a pyramid scheme. But if I can only achieve higher levels of training by bringing lower levels of people in, that is literally. Linguistics are terribly important into how we think, absolutely. But they're also unique based on culture and individual. Landmark, what was it? In the 90s, Erhard stops. So that's like the Erhard. Erhard is, he's given the title often the father of the human potential movement. Human potential movement. None of these guys are talking about any of the substances that they did, all of the indigenous exposure that they have, none of that. They're just like, oh, we figured it out because we're so smart. Human potential movement is a, look at that. It came out of the 1960s. This wellness to supremacy pipeline is a post-World War II phenomena. This is in my lifetime. Human potential movement is rooted in the work of Maslow, Abraham Maslow, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is, I'm holding my computer because my cat wants to eat it. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is that triangle you see that has food, clothing, shelter at the bottom, and then self-actualization at the top. Maslow appropriated that from indigenous cultures. He stole it from Native Americans and never once gave credit. When these tools, when these substances, when these concepts, are taken out of context and then commercialized, right? That is problematic. I'm not saying it's right or wrong or otherwise. It is problematic. It is inherently problematic because traditionally the source does not charge you. You go to the teacher teaches, you become a student of the teacher, an adept. It is a long relationship, and you're in a huge context, a whole system, a system that has history and generations of teachers and checks and balances and ethos and morals. And these systems, typically the instructor or the teacher is sharing what they've learned from others, not what they figured out on their ayahuasca retreat in Costa Rica over the course of 2 weeks. Okay. So last night on the Tic Tac, we were talking about the psychedelic movement because I was thinking about breath work as it relates to consciousness and the pipeline because of this guy, Stanislav Grof. Oh, by the way, and I want to say this again, I'm in favor of a lot of these tools. I just think we need to understand the history and the potential pitfalls if we're not paying attention to where we are because we're on a pipeline and the pipeline is subtle. It is very subtle because it's all these different pieces. And if the individual isn't paying attention, or if we are like colonizer mentality demonizes only what's inconvenient in the moment and co-ops what's convenient, yes, and what can be commercialized. So Stanislav Grof was a contemporary of Timothy Leary's. Again, oral history of the modern psychedelic movement. So I will go and if anybody needs it, but this is how it was told to me. Grof is a contemporary of Leary's. Grof and Leary, of course, they're all looking at LSD, doing all of these studies. LSD gets scheduled by the American government. And, Leary is like, fuck it, we're just going to tune in and drop out, right? And Grof had been reading about Tibetan, I think he'd been reading about Tibetan dream yoga, but I know for sure the Tibetan Book of the Dead factored very heavily into this, where Grof was like, well, maybe there's another way. And the phrase, the word is non-ordinary states of consciousness. So assuming we are all in an ordinary state, a non-ordinary state would be either consuming something or doing something that changes all of our perception and how we experience the world. This is why psychedelics are so fun, because they create that synesthesia in the brain. You can also reach a non-ordinary state of consciousness by going to a flotation tank, a yoga class, running, painting, okay, that flow state. And Grof and his now deceased wife at the Esalen Institute in the 1970s, those of you who have been here, when did the NLP happen? Oh yeah, it was right around that time in Santa Cruz, okay? But Grof is at the Esalen Institute in the 1970s, and he and his wife developed a form of breathwork called holotropic breathwork. This is very important because we're remembering Timothy Leary and the psychedelic thread here. Holotropic breathwork is a practice in which you would lie down on the ground and hyperventilate, and it hyperoxygenates the blood and it hyperoxygenates the body. And it will, at some point, it'll trigger a cathartic release. And then there's a very specific way that facilitators create and maintain a safe container for the person doing the holotropic breathwork to have this release. And as I've experienced it, the breather is kind of, doing this, and then the facilitator will meet at the same rate, and it just helps whatever is in the body get unstuck. So this whole concept of the body keeps the score is very present in holotropic breath work. Timothy Leary, this is more stories that have been told to me, okay? This is what I have been told. I don't think, I haven't been able to find documentation. I do believe the person who told me this because he knew Leary very well. Timothy Leary used to have people do a whole bunch of LSD and then a whole bunch of Kriya Yoga and rise that Kundalini. And they would rise the Kundalini while doing heroic amounts of LSD, and some became psychotic. It's called spiritual psychosis. Leary is doing all of these be-ins, right? These be-ins, and he's bringing this counterculture into the world. We've got the war coming. I mean, there's like all kinds of stuff going on, right? But also the fucking civil rights movement, which benefited white women. We are the ones who benefited from the civil rights movement, and we have not done what we should have been doing this whole time to benefit the people who actually needed the help. Anyway, oh, I'm so excited that I know all of this history. So when you combine something like a extremely warming, invigorating, ascending practice like Kundalini with a synergizing substance like LSD, and then you're not in a container, he sent them off. He just sent them off. Yeah, of course you're going to have problems. And then I hear skinny white yoga chicks. This is an archetype. I always go skinny white yoga chick because there's not like a person in particular, but I hear skinny white yoga chicks advocating for doing breath work and psychedelics, clearly not knowing the history or the risks. Holotropic breath work is a way to achieve a non-ordinary state of consciousness without drugs. Yet, glaucoma, heart disease, psychosis, depression, recent bone breaks, dissociation. There are so many contraindications to that specific just breathing. Groff is still alive. He's at the California Institute of Integral Sciences in San Francisco. Groff had a stroke. Was it 2018 or 2000? I think there was an 8. But Groff had a stroke, so he's not able to communicate as he has in the past. Groff is not necessarily a supremacist, but when you take a tool out of context and put it in a new context, we have to be aware of the tool is in a different context. And Kriya Yoga is not the psychedelic movement. The psychedelic movement co-opted Kriya Yoga. Yes? Okay. Also, the timing of Groff, we have John C. Lilly invented the isolation tank in the 1950s. Flotation therapy. How many of you have gone to an isolation? I love those, by the way, isolation tanks. So wonderful. John C. Lilly was a contemporary of Timothy Leary's. John C. Lilly was deeply and directly involved in a lot of this research with LSD. John C. Lilly was a neuroscientist. John C. Lilly invents the isolation tank. I'm like, oh, I wonder if that was in response to World War II. Going back to my graduate degree, and you know what I was looking at theoretically in grad school, but the isolation tank, right? It becomes this tool. And now I'm thinking culturally, because I've lived in major cities all across the US, and I have watched in the last 30 years, I've watched like flotation therapy, infrared saunas, colonics are really popular. I've just watched it like go, and it all seems to have started in California in the 1970s in the counterculture movement with the hippies, who are all boomers. And a lot of these methodologies and tools, California, yeah, have been they're owned by cisgender, heterosexual, well-funded white men. And now. So, and here we are today. There's a whole thing about the internet, right? Web 1.0. Guess where we were? Guess where we built that? Sunnyvale, California. Guess how many of us drove over Highway 17 to Santa Cruz? Oh, good. Yeah, thank you. Oh my God. Well, yeah, I haven't even brought, somebody had just mentioned race. Like that is just a whole other. What was I? Oh, but I just got distracted by that nice chat. Highway 17, Yahoo. So the two databases that we used to surf on when we were building Yahoo, this was back in the days when you had to like do the algorithms by hand, okay? They were called LSD and ACID. JavaScript, conceived while high. The global network of fiber optic cables that we all rely on, influenced by psychedelics. And a lot of that we can thank Larry Harvey for. And the Burning Man organization, because in the early 90s, that we were just all hanging out there. That's what was happening. And we were all doing drugs. And we were all hanging out with all the human potential people. And many of us, thankfully, I did not fall prey. Many of us got sucked in. Human potential movement, back to Werner Erhard, goes to, there's a line to, anytime you see the word quantum shift, quantum, and not from a science perspective, but from like a social science or a consciousness perspective, I think it's safe to say that pretty much all of those narratives do go back to neurolinguistic programming, because the one guy, his consulting group is like quantum consulting or something. And so it's used for influence and power. It is not used for helping and healing. So why does this woman say she can look at my eyes as a chronic pain sufferer and say whether or not I'm actually in pain? Why is she using a book that is 50 years old? What about autism? What about her own biases? What about the cultural context? And none of that matters, because this expert can just look at you and tell you what's going on. Where do we hear that? I hear that with human design. Oh, if this is your human design, if this is your thing, that means you are this way. No. Oh. I hear that so much with the I have what you need, which is I would say like a core tenet of the rhetoric of the wellness-to-supremacy pipeline is come to me, I have what you need. You will also see these are the folks who are offering you their MLM oils, literal snake oil. They offer you your essential oils. At the beginning of the pandemic, my friends, at the very beginning of the pandemic, there was a studio close to me who has a location just outside of the city limits, just outside. This is supremacy culture in action, just outside city limits. City had put a mask mandate. So what did they do? They had a workshop just outside city limits and said, come on, you don't need to wear a mask. We're not in the city. Very beginning of a global pandemic, finding a way around an action that, within a holistic mindset, wanting to do better for the world, you would think the very simple thing would be to do this. But instead, the supremacist route is to say, how can we get around? How can I get around this? How can I influence you? How can I Oh my gosh, or like conversation, I don't want to start complaining. I had started doing a whole bunch of videos and I realized I need to just sort of just like say all of this from what I know, right? So we had Groff, we have NLP, we have we have Esalen, we have Landmark Forum. Yes, all of this goes to the whatever that HBO documentary about the sex cult was. All of this goes because remember, okay, San Francisco, LA, it's all there. It's so close, so close. John C. Lilly, isolation tanks, decontextualized. Yeah, so like, and then somehow, right? Groff is a psychiatrist. He is a scientist. I would be surprised if, as a scientist, he would ever say something like, oh, forget science, just breathe. He's a scientist. The person who developed NLP is a linguistic person. Like you would think that there's some kind of, but there isn't. There is not. So this human potential movement, this world of like self-help spaces. This is Tony Robbins. This is Eckhart. What the fuck was his name? I did so much with them. Peak Potentials. Harvey T something, Millionaire Mindset. This is where you're going to see Marcy Shimoff. You're going to see the chicken soup people. You're going to see all of the law of attraction folks. You're going to see all of those in this space. And the last time I was with a whole bunch of them at the same time, I was at a workshop week in Aspen, Colorado on 777. It was a very exciting weekend for me. 777. And Marcy Shimoff was there. The guys who wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul was there. Flippin' John Gray was there. All these people. Who else was there? I don't know, but you know, self-help people. And I had an opportunity through that to actually spend a weekend with Marianne Williamson. Marianne Williamson is famous for having run for president. She is also infamous for taking people's money in the 1990s in San Francisco, taking AIDS patients' money, saying, give me your money, I can heal you. Anyway, so she's working from the Course in Miracles. And you know, I believe that your teacher, if you're calling somebody a teacher, if somebody calls himself a teacher, like a teacher, capital T, they best have citation, context, and history. Otherwise, they're a minister. Ministry is great. It's beautiful, but call it what it is. Call it what it is. Own it. The Wellness to Supremacy pipeline is a real thing. It is very sneaky. It's not like there's an individual at the end of it, like pulling strings. It is a cultural phenomena that gives us the promise of liberation and freedom through tools that have been co-opted, adopted, and appropriated from indigenous culture or distilled and weakened from actual science and combined into fun, great, wonderful things that are not science. And that teach us to do things like ignore science. They teach us to do things, these mindset teaches us that this is where you get you are the person who can change your life. It is you, it is up to you. Nobody is going to change it for you. That is this human potential movement. The centering of the individual is one of the primary tenets of supremacy culture. And these tools are fantastic and they're useful. We need to be aware of them, especially if you're going to somebody who looks like I do. because we are the most dangerous creature right now. I hope you have a great day. Bye.